Bills and the Dolphins. So what we do here is we assign a game to all of us, and we give you a little breakdown of what we can be expecting from a fantasy perspective. So a start-sit, a player prop, and a DFS play, and we'll start with the fun little graphic that we have here of what you should be looking at and the injuries that we're keeping an eye on. And the big ones, obviously, in regard to Buffalo, Gabe Davis and Dawson Knox, but we are having some secondary injuries that aren't related to skill players. Teron Armstead, the left tackle for the Dolphins, might not play, dealing with a toe injury, and the secondary for the Bills is a mess. No Micah Hyde, he's not going to play. Jordan Phillips, their defensive lineman, is going to be out. We don't know about Micah Hyde. The other cornerback, Davis, not going to play as well, so it could be a mess there. So, Adam, you got the sit candidates as Devin Singletary and Chase Edmonds. The DFS play is Dawson Knox. And the prop for you, according to Caesar Sportsbook, is Chase Edmonds under 34.5 rushing yards there, which makes a lot of sense based on how the Dolphins' run game has looked so far this season. So let's talk about the running back situation there for these teams and what you think is going to these guys are going to look like. Oh, you know what? No, forget about it. We got to start with Tua. Is he now a must-start guy based on how he played last week? 6 touchdowns against the Ravens. How's he going to do against this Bills defense that's banged up?
You know, I would start him over Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady and start him over Jameis Winston. I'm going to go just a little bit short of calling him a must-start guy. And here's the thing. I mean, the defensive injuries for the Bills are huge. They're a little beat up front, but they might be without 4 important players in the secondary, including both starting safeties. How can you defend the Dolphins with a bunch of backups in your secondary? Well, the Bills' defense has been so much better than I expected it would be. I knew they'd be good, but I didn't think they'd be this good. I do have a lot of respect for them, and that makes Tua less than a must-start. But I think he's going to be started probably in about 70% of leagues. That's my guess. So somewhere between a must-start and a waiver wire option. He's not quite in that must-start territory, but he's a good start. I think they're going to take advantage of the inexperience in the Bills' secondary. And the Bills do not give up big plays. That's been their thing for years now. I think it's going to happen in this game.
Yeah, I'm getting a little more nervous about it, especially if the offensive line is compromised for the Miami Dolphins, because the one thing that the Bills still have is a great pass rush. We saw it in week 1 against the Rams. We saw it last week. I think we're going to see it again. And they play a ton of zone coverage, Jamie. Just they will not get beat by the big play. Adam said that. Against zone coverage this year, when he's thrown the ball inside of 2.4 seconds, and it's a very specific time, it means he's getting rid of the ball quick. He's completed almost 70% of his throws, but it's 5.87 yards per attempt with no touchdowns. That's what the Bills are going to go for. He's going to need a lot of volume in order to come through for fantasy managers. I have him as a top 12 quarterback, but I don't love it. I just like him better than a lot of other guys, including Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Tom Brady. I'd go with him ahead of those guys.